Okay, so we're super excited today after a few technical issues to be with you. And Helen Gautschi has joined us. So that's why I'm just like ecstatic to have Helen with us today. Helen is a specialist in genetics, low penetrance genetics, functional medicine genetics, however you want to kind of bring it out there and use all these common words. And we're super excited to have you on, Helen. And Helen, I'll give you a quick bit of background just before I let Helen say some words. Helen's background is a dietitian. She works for DNALife, DNA Analysis, and DNALife globally. And she is the world expert. She's actually doing a bit of a tour through the US at the moment, just going through to all the conferences and all the major functional medicine practices throughout the US because they use DNALife tests. That's how fantastic these genetics are that DNA analysis are using. So welcome, Helen.
Thanks so much, Garric, for having me and for hosting me here. It's been great. And yeah, America has been great so far. It's been great meeting with all these really amazing practitioners and getting their feedback on the tests. So I look forward to what we have to speak about today, and any questions that come from it, I'm happy to help.
Absolutely, been exciting. And I know you've been to a couple of conferences. Do you want to let us know briefly which conferences you went to?
Yes, so recently went to IMMH, which is that Integrative Medical and Mental Health Conference in Dallas, Texas. So that was already a great experience. But the conference was around 4 days long. There was Dale Bredesen speaking on just the on neurodegenerative disorders, on improving mental health in the Alzheimer's disease spectrum. So that was really exciting to hear, and getting the feedback from practitioners, from medical doctors, psychiatrists, nutritional therapists, and your homeopaths, such a broad range of healthcare practitioners getting so excited about the area of functional medicine, of integrative medicine, and when we spoke about our tests, getting really excited about using genetics as part of one of their tools in their practice. So it was a really great conference. I would encourage those next year to attend it.
Fantastic. And then I know you spent some time at the Ultra Wellness Center with Dr. Mark Hyman and Dr. Lapine. I mean, how was that experience?
Yes, it was good. It was unfortunately a little bit short, so hoping to go back for another visit. But it was really good. We got to have a nice clinical round, discuss one of our new tests, DNA Mind, which is a really exciting test around neurodegenerative health, mental health disorders, hence the IMMH conference. And there was really good feedback from them on that test. And then also just discussing with all of their whole team the following day on going through their own tests and trying to get a little bit extra value from what the genetics were telling them. So that was it was a great experience, and seeing their practice was really also such a great experience, once in a lifetime opportunity.
Fantastic, because I believe they've been using your genetics from DNA analysis exclusively for now many years.
For a number of years, yes.
Yeah, so that just shows you the quality, and we know Dr. Mark Hyman is obviously the celebrity of functional medicine. So that's super exciting. So Helen, I want to go into just a little bit of the specifics of genetics and bringing it to the practical application. A lot of people just don't even know where it fits in. So maybe you can just start with some of the basics to help people and understand, what is low penetrance genetics, what is nutrigenomics, what is epigenetics, and what is the difference between those?
It's a good question, very broad question that we do go into a lot more detail at these big trainings. But really, where it fits in is, each of us are unique, and part of that of being unique is because of our unique genome. So we carry around 20 to 25,000 genes in each person, but in those 25,000 genes, we have a lot of variation that occurs. And so if you're thinking of your genes as coding for enzymes and proteins, and how those enzymes and proteins function with one another to communicate with one another to make you who you are, part of it. And when there are variations in those genes coding for those proteins, if there's a variation that occurs and which will be different from me to you, it will lead to that protein functioning a little bit differently, the enzyme functioning a little bit differently. And so our responsiveness to environment and dietary intake is going to also be different. So we can't expect every single person to have the same response to the same intervention. And obviously we take age and a lot of other factors into account, but genetics just takes it that one step further to personalize nutrition and lifestyle factors. So then when we're talking about what we say is low penetrance genetics, that's where having a variation is something that will give a practitioner insight as to how to further personalize the intervention to decrease risk of disease. So if we have a variation, say, in a detoxification pathway, we might not be clearing certain toxins as well as someone else is. But that is not to say that that is a death sentence, and it's not to say you will develop a disease because of that variation. So when we're talking low penetrance, the environment is so important. So it's genetic variations together with environment that will make up who you are sitting in front of, or who you are looking in the mirror yourself today. So it's genetic variations plus environmental factors that gives you your phenotype. And so it's a really nice area where you can take this information and intervene, understanding where the weaknesses are in pathways, and put in the correct environment for who you are, getting the best person for who you can be. So longevity-wise, health-wise, it's based on that genetic variation plus environmental intervention. And then on the other hand, we've got those high penetrance variations or high penetrance mutations, and that's a different story. Those are different laboratories, and that's really where there's very little intervention that in terms of lifestyle that we can do. So the nutrigenomics is genetic variation plus lifestyle equaling who you are.
Fantastic. That's such a great answer, because a lot of people just don't understand how does it fit in and what is low penetrance, what's high penetrance. And I mean, to sum it up, as you just said, is low penetrance is understanding everybody's so individual. And then it's about understanding which pathway is individual. And then how do we influence that pathway to create more optimal pathways?
Exactly.
So, I mean, that is just so fundamental on personalized medicine, functional medicine in what we're doing ultimately. So how would this be now useful in our practices? What's the practical application for us?
So that's the golden question. There's no point in us testing these variations, getting your genetic makeup and that information if we can't do anything about it. So why this is so useful in practice is it's another key in your puzzle, another piece of the puzzle when you're seeing complicated patients and they're coming to you with things that are sometimes not diagnosable, and there are certain weaknesses and that they have because of these variations in these biological pathways. And so by a practitioner understanding that information and understanding where to prioritize and focus their interventions, be it in detoxification or whether it's methylation or inflammation, which is the area that is actually under the most amount of stress because those variations in those genes are not managed or leading to that pathway just not being managed correctly. So when we take it through to a practical level, the practitioner can understand that there are the variations in that specific area, so it gives insight. It's one piece of the puzzle. Of course, you need to get the background of the patient using a really good systems biology approach, but this is one part of that approach for creating a patient-centric intervention. And so by getting that information and then being able to intervene with nutritional recommendations that we now know with the evidence can improve those pathways, we either bypass what we call lazy genes, or we can increase or decrease expression of genes because we understand those pathways a little bit better. That will improve that overall pathway and that health. And then how it fits into overall practice is then you get guidance as to which functional tests to do next, So it can really guide you as to which other biochemical tests should you be considering based on that individual's genotype.
And I love that. I love it when you've got this practical application in our practices, because I mean, isn't the world of information just been, we've just been surrounded by it so much, and the information world is so generalized at the moment on social media, Dr. Google, it's all just general, and that's great for most because we get them on track. But how do we then go to personalized, individualized treatment, and what more specific can it be than your genetics?
Exactly.
So this is just, it's throwing the world of healthcare on its head, because we are able now to know very specifically for each person, and everybody's so different, their specific genetics. And then, as you said, those genetics then can lead us to a real-time test, because of that ability to understand the predictability of those pathways. That's super exciting. So I think what a lot of people want to hear is they're seeing on television, left, right, and center is 23andMe, Ancestry, all advertised like mad. So we know, okay, it's available to everybody to know their genetics. Nobody's holding that back. But what is now the difference between DNA analysis and the specialized labs, and then these generalized 23andMe and Ancestry?
It's a good question, and it is asked a lot from us. And it's something that should really be top of mind for practitioners, and practitioners should be able to be discerning when choosing their laboratory that they're working with. So there are a number of things to consider. And just starting off maybe with, say, 23andMe and some of these other more generalized, these bigger labs, these generalized labs, that is where you submit your sample to a big laboratory, and they do a large amount of analysis on a large part of your genome, giving information back on just your gene and your genotype. So there's very little interpretation that comes with that. And from there, the consumer or the practitioner would have to plug that into another software program to get some kind of interpretation. There's some things though with what we do is quite different, is that what we're testing, or when we're testing in our laboratory, which is an ISO accredited laboratory, so that's always the first thing you should ask of the laboratory that you're working with is, are they ISO accredited? What that means is it's just really the gold standard for quality for the laboratory, so that you know when you get your genotype result is AA, for example, you know that it is AA, and when you go to another laboratory, that is reproducible. You should get AA again, because as we know, our genes don't change. So that's the first thing. Check for ISO accreditation, and it's just understanding that the quality control of that laboratory is really good. So then the second thing is that when doing the gene analysis, and especially in this area of nutrigenomics and practical application, you want to get information that is useful. So as you were saying, Garric, there's so much information out there. You can check on Dr. Google for all sorts of things that come through, and these chatter sites where a lot of information around you carrying this gene or this genotype and it's the end of the world, or some things like that. And it's very important to understand that when you're getting your genes analyzed, you need actionable information. So at DNALife, we have a strict SNP selection criteria that we go through. And so we're just choosing a number of things that we have to focus on when we actually include the genetic variations in our tests. And that being, so one of them being that we need to make sure that the variation is actually prevalent in the population. So it's not just testing for variations and charging the patient or the practitioner money for doing a test, and it's actually not going to even come up that the variation is over there because it's not prevalent enough in the population. We also need to make sure that there's evidence behind that gene variant. Some variations we see on genes, but there's no actual relevance to that gene variation. we need to make sure that it is relevant to a specific pathway, and does that influence disease? If it doesn't, well, what's the point in testing it? That's what we're trying to find out, this information to treat our patients. And then with that, is there an intervention? So there has to be a relationship to a weakness in a pathway, to a specific disease phenotype, and then also based on that, is there actually something we can do about it? Remember, we're in the business of changing lives and improving lives. So it's genetic variations plus environment. And so is there an intervention that we can put into place? And then lastly, we need the evidence there. So we need to make sure that there's actually sufficient evidence to support including those variations in the tests. And so by making sure all of that information is there, at least when the reports get given to the practitioner, they can be quite confident with the information and with the genetic variations that are being tested. The reports are given in a quite a user-friendly manner. We've gotten feedback so far that that's the case, so we can go into that a little bit more. And then some of the other big things around some of the big generalized labs and some of the questions is that with our ISO accreditation, we are not a research laboratory. So we do not use an individual's genetic information for research. Everything in all individuals' information is actually hidden with it's barcoded, so identity is also kept private. And actually, one sample is destroyed after 3 months. So and patients can request for that sample to be destroyed immediately if they want to, but that sample is destroyed according to that ISO accreditation practice that we're not a research laboratory. So that information is private.
Wow, that's incredible, because we get that question asked so much from our practitioners and our patients, is like, what happens? Are they looking at research with us? So it's private, it's destroyed, everything is protected as far as it's not going out there to be used into some big pharma or whatever it may be.
Exactly. So no insurance companies get hold of it. I know there are all these questions around that can happen.
Absolutely. Okay, so that is powerful. As a practitioner for myself and communicating with my patients, that's useful information. So can you give us just one great practical example, maybe a really common example of, where genetics can help practically with a chronic disease, so people can just see it in real life? Yes,
absolutely. So, sure. Let me choose. There's so many good ones. Let me that maybe is I think is quite on the forefront of a lot of this research and in this area of functional medicine. I'm going to go for a big one. Let's talk about, say, ApoE. I think everyone should hopefully get an idea of this one. So I'll talk about ApoE, which is encoding your apolipoprotein E. It's a really important gene or lipoprotein in cholesterol metabolism, transport of cholesterol, and works in both your periphery, so just your entire body, but then also in the nervous system, which then when you're considering how important is this gene going to be in overall health, we can consider, okay, well, if we're looking at ApoE in terms of cardiovascular health and transporting of cholesterol, it's going to be very important. And there may also be, and there is, because of the research showing us this, that there's a strong relationship with cognitive health as well. So this is one gene where we've got the evidence behind it. There's a functional SNP that occurs on it. So there's a functional variation that occurs on ApoE, where you could either be carry an E2, an E3, or an E4 genotype, and you'll get a combination of those because you carry one from each parent. So you would be, say, for example, E3, which would be the normal genotype, or E3, E4, which would be possibly the higher risk genotype. And because of that change in that variation, it leads to a change in the protein structure, and how that protein structure is going to attach to our LDL receptors and transport cholesterol through the system. And so when we're understanding that someone is an E3 genotype, which is almost like normal gene and your normal protein, we can say, okay, well, this should lead to normal lipid metabolism. Whereas with an E4 genotype, what it's been associated with, so now we want to see, is there an imbalance in a pathway, and is there a risk for an abnormal phenotype? So we see with E4 carriers, there is a significantly increased risk for cardiovascular disease, and based on a number of reasons. That your E4 genotypes lead to a change in your cholesterol metabolism, where there's much higher total, but also LDL and VLDL cholesterol. Your oxidized cholesterol is also higher because of that risk. You also get higher oxidative stress or decreased antioxidant status. There's more inflammation associated with E4. So just on a real-time basis, seeing that genotype, you can understand that this individual may be at risk for a number of chronic diseases of lifestyle, including cardiovascular disease. And then we can also take it across to the cognitive health area as well. And so then based on how we can intervene there, we also know from the research is that actually E4 carriers are the most sensitive to the environment. So yes, they're the most sensitive to negatives in the environment, but also if we put in the correct interventions and based on the research that's looking at a much higher antioxidant status, looking at good quality fats and your oily fish, your EPA and DHA actually needing to be significantly higher than what we would call your RDA. And also we can get into a lot more specifics around just that one gene and how putting in certain interventions can balance that pathway a lot better, and we can decrease the risk for cardiovascular disease, or even seeing someone with an abnormal lipogram, so having abnormal lipids, how we can improve that by understanding E4 carriers are going to respond differently compared to an E3 genotype. So just one gene, I get excited about it, so carry on.
Can hear the passion coming through, and it's amazing how you can see one gene and then you can predict right the way through to a disease, and then you know what are the interventions along. So, I mean, in essence, everybody should have their genes done as early as possible to be able to prevent these things from ending up like with Alzheimer's and cardiovascular disease, because the interventions are known now, the research is out there. I mean, that is what is just so powerful.
Yeah.
So before we round up, Helen, let's maybe just chat about the workshops that we're going to be doing, the support around DNA analysis, and how do practitioners go the next step. You know, it's all fair and well doing reports and getting those snips and understanding, but we need to be educating practitioners and getting them to be using it efficiently. So I know it's you guys have been doing workshops for many years, and maybe we need to just let everybody know that we're going to be doing an advanced workshop on the 2nd and 3rd of November in Orlando. So Helen and I will be doing a 2-day advanced workshop combining genetics, DNA analysis training, and functional medicine, what we're seeing in the practice, and which tests then to start using when we know what SNPs, what genetics are inefficient, and then how that connects to a patient's clinical signs and symptoms. And really, it's about connecting all the dots, making it more practical. So Helen and I have been talking about this for a while, and we're super excited. It's really a world's first that we're combining this all together. So just so everybody knows, if you are interested in that, we haven't even started advertising that yet. We've just let this out there. What's the cliche?
Yeah.
I forget the cliche, but yeah, we've dropped the bomb.
Yeah, here we go.
We dropped the bomb. So if you are interested in that workshop, leave a comment below this post, and we'll be sure to message you and just let you know some of the details and what is happening. So that is very exciting. We unfortunately going to have to end this as we're going into the next load of training that we're doing. So we apologize for being a bit late today on Facebook with this live. But Helen, again, I just want to thank you so much for your input and just helping people understand where genetics is in the world of healthcare and how practical it is nowadays, because it's just adding so much value to our practices, and I know many other practices. So thank you so much, Helen. Anything else you want to
Thanks
just
so
end
much.
with?
No, I mean, just thanks so much for having me. And it really is an exciting field that is growing really quickly. So don't get left behind. Get educated in the field. And we really are excited. This is a world first on this test pairing educational seminar in November. So it would be great to see you there.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thanks again, Helen.
Thank you. Keep well, everyone.
See you, everyone. Bye then.
Bye.